Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. My name is Nick and today guys we're jumping down into the world of Cardano. There's some fantastic news that has reached my inbox today all about Cardano, so I'm going to share that with you guys. Now, as I get into the video, if you find it useful and informative, why not go ahead and hit that like button? I really do appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, then why not consider subscribing? You can, of course, always unsubscribe later. And if you haven't yet joined us in Discord, why not check it out? Linked in the description down below. It's a fantastic community talking crypto 24/7. It's completely free, and it is the first place that we go to notify you of everything that's going on in the crypto space. So why not go ahead and check it out? Let's jump down into the desktop and let's start talking about a little stuff that's going on the Cardano ecosystem. So let's do it. Let's break right down here. So Cardano network is seeing a tremendous amount of traction, right, in the everyday aspects of the ecosystem, right? So in the latest ecosystem update this week, it has been revealed that there are a total number of projects building on the blockchain is now around 1,230. So it's pretty significant. A lot of people are in fact building on the ghost chain, if you will. So there's a lot of things that are projects as well, also migrating from Ethereum. We spoke about that earlier this week. So it's interesting to see that we've got a number here of over 1,000 projects that are building, in fact, over 1,200 projects that are building on the Cardano ecosystem. The protocol has other novel milestones defined for the week, which also spans the issuance of 8.18 million native tokens on the network of the total 1,230 different projects that are building on the chain. Exactly 126 launched in what signifies a very novel move to help push the diversity of the decentralized applications on the Cardano blockchain. So tagged one of the most technologically advanced layer 1 protocols out there, and that is competing with the likes of Ethereum as a dominant hub for smart contracts. Cardano relies on the development efforts of its ecosystem to keep a consistent and sustained growth. Now, while still behind Ethereum, the 65.4 million transactions carried out on the protocol shows promise that Cardano is also worth watching or one to want to watch out for. And this is something that's not new to the channel. This is something that we talk about all the time. We think that Cardano has absolutely massive potential, and for many different reasons. And it can be frustrating for many, unfortunately, that Cardano hasn't moved in the way that they wanted it to as quickly as they wanted it to, specifically in terms of the ADA price action or for the development on chain. But slow and steady does in fact win the race, in my opinion. So I think it's important that we don't just kind of, jump in thinking that the second that we buy some ADA, it's going to 10x in its price and, we're going to get some instantaneous gains. There is a bit of a process to kind of follow here. In line with its prior performance, the week also saw as many as 72,000 token policies released on the Cardano network, which is pretty reasonable. It also highlights 7,828 Plutus scripts that were written out of a total 2,410 scripts on the Plutus v2. So it's pretty interesting to kind of see how things are developing. Now, Charles Hoskinson, the founder of the Cardano blockchain, is known for his transparent approach to the development efforts in the community. And I think that's very much what is required, right? It's one of the things that we do here at Cheeky Crypto is we try to be as transparent as possible. Jump down in the Discord, we've got a transparency report. You can see most of the things that that are going on in terms of Cheeky Crypto down in there as well. And it's great that Charles Hoskinson has a very similar approach. We think that transparency is absolutely vital in this space. So notably, he is leading a horde of innovators who also believe in decentralization. Some of the dApps that have been introduced thus far are some of the most innovative in the crypto ecosystem. These include 𝗕𝗘, the stablecoin, which is considered the most collateralized in the industry, while the Cardano name is becoming more relevant with respect to the diversity of its offerings. And there are still additional innovations scheduled to go live within the blockchain. And I do think that 𝗕𝗘 is going to be a pretty big deal when it comes to the next bullish market, and the different projects that are building on Cardano and how you're going to be able to interact with them. I think we're going to see an explosion of DeFi on the Cardano ecosystem, and I think that's going to really cement in where Cardano is positioned. Now, in this regard, in terms of what's being kind of built and the innovations on the blockchain, there are a number of significant events that are being scheduled for the smart contract by the core development teams. For instance, the 𝗲𝗏 team has not enhanced the structure and updated Haskell for several index functions. So within the smart contracts, and there are also plans to build on the property tests, the testing of precise trace-based failure for 𝗲𝗏 validators, and general updating of the Cardano smart contracts documentation. So I think there's going to be some interesting things that are going to be unfolding within there. Now, obviously, as I read this kind of information that's been sent through, I think that they probably need to reword some of those sentences, but let me just try to break that down. Essentially, we've got some interesting things going on with the 𝗲𝗏 side of things, with some updates to the Haskell side of several index functions, which I think are very important when it comes to smart contract functionality. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more stuff kind of come through. Not necessarily stuff that users in terms of retail are probably going to notice, but from a validator point of view, we're going to be able to see a lot more, and we're going to be able to see if we can get that, kind of put that into testing and so forth. So pretty interesting to kind of see what unfolds there around that 𝗲𝗏, because I do think the smart contracts, historically speaking, have been a little bit more difficult to work with than what people might be expecting. I think we're going to be moving further and further into a very standardized way, and that's really where 𝗲𝗏 comes in. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all that kind of unfolds. Now, it is not uncommon for regular updates to take place on Cardano. However, none of these impact the operational functionality of the network, and this is how essentially the Cardano network has been operating and working, and how it was designed from the get-go. So one of the most anticipated innovations on the Cardano blockchain, if I can get my words out, is the Hydra scaling tool. Now, Hydra is to Cardano what most layer 2 protocols are to layer 1 blockchains like Ethereum. So basically, it's like a Polygon's Matic, if you will, to the Ethereum chain. Now, that is an oversimplification of what Hydra is, but Hydra is something that people who are building dApps hook into and use. Okay, it's not necessarily something that is there straight out of the box of Cardano, and you kind of have the ability to use it. You have to kind of build it in into what you're doing. And what does Hydra do? Well, Hydra allows the transaction scaling up to 1 million transactions per second, and theoretically even further beyond that. If you really understand how Hydra works, it's up to 1,000 transactions per second per node. So the more validators there are on the chain, the more transactions per second. But it's not as simple as you just automatically get X amount of transactions. It scales itself depending on the throughput. So if you need more, you have more, and if you don't need it, it will take it away. It's unrequired, right? It's no point in having something there if it's not needed. So Hydra is a very interesting tool that I think is starting to get used a little bit, but I think is going to be absolutely massive for the future of Cardano, specifically when we start talking about microtransactions and things like that. We're going to need a lot more throughput and a lot more transactions per second from time to time. Not all the time, but when you need it, it's going to be there. So I think for the dApps that are going to be looking at these things are really dependent on the use case of what they're looking at. So if you're building a dApp that does require microtransactions, then Hydra is definitely the place to be looking. But what about price movements? And well, when it comes to price, there's lots of different things that you can look at. And ultimately, one of the key things, or two of the key things that really matter, and the only things that, in my opinion, that we really need to be focusing in on are the supply side and the demand side. And you can look at a candlestick, you can look at all the different patterns. You can have head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders, cup and handle, inverse cup and handle. You could also have a dragon pattern if you want. You could have a butterfly, a bat. You name it, it probably exists, right? And essentially, you can have all these different patterns, all these wonderful things. But essentially, it all really does break down to two simple things, supply and demand. Okay, so in order to see any market move, either positively, as in price appreciates and goes up, or negatively, and price goes down and it depreciates, it comes down to whether there's an imbalance in that supply and the demand. So if supply were to drop down and demand was to increase, Okay, so a shrinkage of your supply and demand increasing, you appreciate your asset value. So that's really where bull markets come in, right? And the very definition of a bullish market is when the demand outpaces that of the supply. Okay, so essentially what we look for is to see what's going to create a shrinkage of the supply and what's going to increase in the demand. And I think Cardano kind of has this right. It takes time. It's not something that you're going to see instantaneous results on, but it's something that you have to kind of appreciate over a long period of time. The things that are being built on Cardano and all those innovative, dApps that are being built and kind of being utilized slowly over time are key to two different things. One, you're going to see potentially shrinkage of supply as we see a growth in DeFi, and we see a more total value locked on chain, as in you're going to be creating liquidity pools and things like that. You're going to start seeing ADA getting locked up in those liquidity pools, and that shrinks the supply down. And at the same time, we have 1,230 dApps being built on the ecosystem. That brings in demand. And so what we can find ourselves in is the imbalance between the supply and the demand, but in a positive way where we start to see price appreciation. Likewise, when you start to see that demand goes too high and supply kind of reaches its equilibrium, you'll tend to find that you'll see that the imbalance starts to correct itself, and then there's more supply coming in as that selling pressure increases, making more ADA available for sale, to be purchased and made available to sold. You'll see the demand decreasing as people lose interest, and eventually what you tend to find is the bearish market comes, and the bearish market is defined when the supply outpaces that of the demand. So it's important that we focus in on supply and demand. Those are the two key things that really do matter. It doesn't matter if you follow Elliott wave theory, smart money concepts, your bat symbols, your butterfly symbols, your dragon symbols, your trend line analysis, however you want to do it. Essentially, it all comes down to supply and demand. So what about price? Well, I see that everything on Cardano is gearing up quite nicely after this bearish market that we've been in, where we've had that imbalance, where we've seen insufficient demand and an increase in the supply as more and more people were selling during the bearish times. We find ourselves now with a pretty balanced market where we're looking to tip it in favor of bullish. Not there yet, in my opinion, but we're getting very close. So we do think there's going to be some pretty decent price appreciations in the future, but I still kind of want to say that it's always possible that we get rejected on our EMAs and 250 EMAs here, and we do see a lot more selling pressure creating that imbalance, and we actually see less demand because there isn't terribly too much right now. There's a little bit from retail, but it's not major, and if we do start to see a slippage of that retail, as in retail start selling because they need the funds, then you're going to ultimately start seeing this pull back quite a bit. That being said, I still see pretty decent progression to the upside. We may have bottomed out at 23 cent, but I suspect that it's still possible that we do push down a fraction more to maybe towards that 19, but it could possibly be a little bit lower. But ultimately, if we have bottomed out, our prices would actually be significantly higher. As you can kind of see here, we do see this range. I spoke about this not too long ago, where we can see pretty good progression to the upside. Now, a new all-time high seems to be on the horizon here through Elliott wave theory. Pretty much most other people would probably agree with that. And of course, there are some interesting resistances that we need to be aware of. I can see straight off the bat here, around $4.77 is going to be an interesting resistance at the 618. This is an area that's on the Fibonacci retracement tool, and it's going to be a fib number that is going to resonate incredibly well with people. The same with the 786. This comes in around $11. But typically, and I say typically, an ABC structure would go to a 1-to-1 ratio. Sometimes it extends above 1-to-1 and goes to 1.236, so 123.6% of the A wave essentially. And that actually puts us at a really interesting point. Now, it's going to be really difficult to push the price that high because there's going to be an immense amount of selling pressure on that journey to the upside. But imagine that there's a lot of dApps being built, right? 1,230. And imagine that a lot of total value lock increases on chain. And a lot of people stake and they don't believe that we're going to see a bearish market right away, and maybe people are going to hold out for a lot longer. And if that's the case, then we could see a pretty significant surge with ADA's price. Right now, $34 is on the 1-to-1 and $116 is on the 1.236. Now, I do not imagine that we're going to push up towards the $116, but I really wouldn't mind it if it did. I don't think that's really something that we're going to be able to get up towards. I think $34 is definitely hopium. It's definitely going to be something that we want to be targeting and wanting to be hoping for. But let's be realistic. Most people are going to be looking for nice round numbers. So around the $10, $11, I think is really where this thing might actually top out in the next bullish market. But I would love to be wrong, and I'd love to see this move up into that $34 to $116 range. And now I do know market cap would be absolutely extortionate, right? But you've got to bear in mind that the market cap itself is actually only a calculation based on price. And as I said, the only two things you need to focus on are the supply and the demand. If you can nail those two things, everything else kind of slots in place. And of course, the market cap of ADA might be very significant. The market cap of Bitcoin would be very significant, Ethereum and so forth. It's not to create an imbalance. It's not to say that ADA would flip Ethereum or anything like that. It's just to say that price would appreciate pretty amazingly here. But let's be realistic. Let's get up into a new all-time high. Let's see how price reacts to the 61.8% and also how it reacts to the 786 or the 78.6% levels. And we'll see how things kind of go. The structures internally will help, and we'll get a good idea as to kind of where the selling pressures are mounting anyway. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Do you think it's really poised for a massive run to the upside? Do you think that Cardano really can challenge that of Ethereum? Let me know in the comments. If you found this useful and informative, smash the like button. I do appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, why not subscribe? Don't forget to join us down in Discord. And guys, I'll catch you all in the next one.
We are not financial advisors. None of what we have communicated verbally or in writing here should be considered as financial advice. It is not. Do your own research before investing in any digital asset or affiliate offers, and understand that investing in any crypto is risky. If you do, you need to be prepared to lose your entire investment. This video is for information and entertainment purposes only. All our videos are strictly personal opinions. Please make sure you do your own research and never take our opinions for financial guidance. There are multiple strategies, and not all strategies fit all people. Our videos are not financial advice.